It is like an apocalypse, said one of the survivors in Hawaii after the fire that tore across Lahaina in Maui. A resort town reduced to ruins turned to ashes. The deadliest U.S. wildfire in 100 years, with at least 93 people dead. An apocalypse indeed. This disaster was not Mother Nature. It happened because of settler colonialism, capitalism, and the consequential upcoming of the Anthropocene. Naomi Klein says that all over Maui, golf courses glisten emerald green, hotels manage to fill up their swimming pools, and corporations stockpile water to sell to luxury estates. And yet, when it came to the fire, to fight the fires, some hoses run dry. Big corporations, golf courses, and hotels have been taking water from locals for years. And there was no water left. Specifically, the water rights of native Hawaiians, rights that a long parade of plantations, real estate developers, and luxury resorts have been stifling for near 2 centuries. As the flames approached, Terari feared that under cover of emergency, those large players might finally get their chance to grab West Maui's water for good. It is like an apocalypse. This phrase is resounding everywhere on our planet. We are under climate colonialism, where capitalism is already going after local people, offering pennies of the dollar to buy their land. Doreen Martinez defines climate colonialism this way. Climate colonialism forces a re-embodiment and relocation of how, why, and who is at fault responsible. The climate is falling to merely change. It's being colonized and forced to alter, modify, and as catastrophes indicate, it is rebelling and resisting the assault upon it. Somebody can get some water for me, please. Climate colonialism and its disasters are indeed everywhere. But it is the poorest countries that are paying a high price. Who cares for Chad, Ethiopia, Sudan, Syria, Pakistan, Fiji, Somalia, the Sahel? Thank you, my brother. The dry corridor of Central America. Who cares? Only those who can offer some profit to financial capitalism or offer service to the rich will be cared. 61,000 people died on extreme heat in Europe. Thank you, my brother, appreciate it. In 2022, how many more died around the world? This year has been the worst year in human history for high temperatures across the planet, and fires are everywhere. Over 1,000 active blazes are burning across Canada in its worst ever wildfire season. As I wrote this lecture, I stopped frequently to add fires around the world. Last Friday, fires burned more than 200 hectares of land in the Apurimac region of Peru. Also on Friday, Greece reported its worst wildfire season on record with 180,000 acres burning. Our house, our bodies are burning, my friends. Fires burned out of control in the Mediterranean, Algeria, Croatia, France, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Tunisia, Turkey, United States, and so on. Temperatures in some places went up by as much as 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels. The United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres said, "The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived." Perhaps what he's saying is updating what Jesus said 2,000 years ago in Mark 9:43 about a place where the fire never goes out. Recently, David Wallace Wells welcomed us to the age of the urban inferno. The Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities in the United States are calling on Congress to pass the Extreme Heat Emergency Act. The bill would add extreme heat and wildfire smoke events to a list of disasters that can unlock supplemental assistance from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. While it is naturalizing the fires, this call to Congress is like asking a doctor for more Band-Aids to cure cancer. The real call should be to stop fossil fuel and its deadening consequences. However, last year the lobby for environmental deregulation pushed the biggest investment ever in history of fossil fuels. In 2022, the big five monstrous companies, Exxon, Chevron, Shell, BP, and Total Energies, all revealed last year's was the most profitable in their respective history with $200 billion profit. We might be facing soon the collapse of the Gulf Stream, the collapse of the flow of the Atlantic Ocean, the desertification of the soil, the loss of fresh water, dried up rivers, the collapse of food production due to unstable weather, climate change, overfishing, and agribusiness. Definitely, we have entered the era of the Anthropocene, which means where humans are the primary cause of shifting and changing the core structure of the planet Earth. It is our imprint, human imprint, altering the basis of geological, biological, and climate patterns of the Earth that took millennia, thousands and thousands and thousands of years to be what it is right now. All indicators of climate change, climate damage are showing the stress, disturbance, and instability. We are at or above the planetary limits for climate change, freshwater change, biosphere integrity, land system change, atmospheric aerosol loading, ocean acidification, and biogeochemical flows. All structures that shouldn't be changed. The Earth is hurting deeply. An indigenous shaman, David Copenauer from the Amazon forest, said, "You know what you non-indigenous people call climate change? We call the revenge of the earth. For the earth is a living, thinking, feeling organism, and it is responding." The earth, just like we are, living, thinking, feeling organisms. Whatever happens to the land, my siblings, will happen to our bodies. For our bodies belong to the earth. So we must tend to the hurts of the land. And if it was with all of these disastrous things in mind that I thought about talking today in reference to bearing grief and breathing liberation in this time of the Anthropocene. But before we go to those two inhaling, exhaling movement of bearing grief and breathing liberation, I wanted to talk a little bit of why we got here, what are the causes for our present condition, so that what we do will be sustainable, and not only fluffy stuff to just appease our anxious hearts. We start with coloniality, or continue with this. The United States is marked by colonial project at white Europeans with its patriarchal supremacy rules, plantation projects, and capitalist economic and political systems. Lewis Warren writes in God's Red Sun, "At least since the founding of Plymouth Plantation, English settlers had seen the colonization of North America as a sacred project commanded by God, the redemption of the garden from the wilderness, the manifest destiny, the conquering of the West." When colonialism came to the United States, the indigenous people were decimated, which means to be turned into 10%. And with them, the natural landscapes, animals, and their habitat, all destroyed. So we see that the process of colonialism, it's the juncture of religious, economic, social, and ecological all together, all shaped in one colonial project of domination. Since colonialism is a mass producer of melancholy, and capitalism, its twin brother, is a machine that creates absences. Melancholy is that continuous attachment to lost objects, people, things, and places, the lingering of the unfinished process of loss that stays with us. The colonial process and its structure creates melancholia and does not allow us the full process of proper mourning. So we are always dealing with our losses as melancholy. Why? Colonial capitalism has a simple double movement. It spreads death all around, and then it hides its violence as if it doesn't exist or never did. So we don't know what we are grieving or mourning, or what is it that we have lost. The result is that we continue deeply in that field of melancholy, holding losses that never found a closure in this system. While we never found language for our losses, we don't have time to mourn. We don't look death in the eyes. We don't like to talk about it. We pass away, we don't die. We don't have funerals for the dead. We don't listen to the dead ones. Coloniality violently takes away our territory, our sense of place, and within place, a sense of time, past, present, and future, and what we would call home, our deepest belonging. Where do we belong? We belong to a neighborhood, not to the land. We belong to a house, not to the land. In other words, colonialism makes us always be in the wrong place, or a passing place, or a strange land, a place that is no longer ours. We're always hanging. As Bruno Latour said, we have never landed. Capitalism and colonialism has this power on us. Capitalism fosters emotional, social, cultural, and sexual patterns that we mostly unconsciously accept and follow. In capitalism, we are infused with competition, mistrust, destruction, predation, brutalism, and cannibalism. Capitalism privatizes what should be commons, like the water, land, seeds, food, to belong just to a few, and make us only worth the profit we can provide to others. And if in your life, my friends, you mess up one day, I'm sorry, but you will be erased from the capitalist book of life or death. Capitalism creates monocultures of people, land and animals, out of hundreds of thousands of grains and plants and animals. Capitalism only overexploits a few: rice, wheat, and maize, or corn, chicken, cattle, pig, and sheep. Everything else becomes excess. The structure of the slavery plantation continues through this day, through monocultures in the land and in our societies. Colored people, women, LGBTQIA plus communities, children, elderly, all people targeted for either profit for somebody else or destruction. But capitalism is not only an economic system, it is also an emotional one, a spiritual one, and a theological one. Walter Benjamin has showed us how capitalism is a religion that tries to solve afflictions, anxieties, and problems that the system itself creates. The worship space of capital that we love to go when we are bored or whatever we feel sad, the temples, the stores of merchandise, where we consume among its priests and priestesses, managers of this religion. Shaman David Kopenawa called us all the people of the merchandise. The spiritual spell, there's a spiritual spell of colonial capitalism. Capitalism has grown so much that it has taken even our metaphysics. We measure our worth by what we have accomplished. Our goals are limited by material desires. The meaning of our work rests in the ability to buy this or that product. Who you are have become what you have. Capitalism makes us focus on the individual and erase from us the very core of who we are, a collective. That is why the spirituality of capitalism is all about lonely survival. Are you going to make it? You are responsible to make it. If you don't make it, sorry, you're a loser. And we are all divided. I am against you. There's very few jobs. I'm against you. If I take it, I'm sorry. You have to figure out what to do. I'm not responsible for you. The divide and conquer of the colonial financial empire persists. In regards to the Anthropocene, global warming is becoming a danger to the capital existence because we have to change. But if we change, we stop profit, we stop development, we stop growth. That's exactly what we need. But the people of the merchandise are so crazy that we cannot stop buying, otherwise we will stop living. We need the profit. So much so that we are even more prone to believe that climate disaster is a hoax than to believe that we are heading towards the end of our species' lives. The capitalist religion thrives on the destructive parts of ourselves. It feeds us with illusions, greed, envy, anger, fear, arrogance, revelry, hate, murder, and more. The capitalist religion gives us dreams of conquering, not of compassion. The capitalist religion does not allow us to share, but gives us incentives to hoard. The capitalist religion infuses us with hatred and competition, not solidarity. The capitalist religion uses institutions, political structures, and religious systems to paralyze possible changes, to adequate our living to the ways of consumption, infusing in us fears of others. And when we get sick, healing is also an individual thing, it's not a collective. Capitalism has stolen so much of God, Allah, Buddha, Jesus, witchcraft, and almost every form of spirituality in order to give us a false sense of peace, so we can continue consuming and not changing our ways of living. Isabel Stangers and Philippe Nahé understood capitalism in a more speculative and spectral way. They say that capitalism is a sorcery that captures and possesses us all. Sorcery, augurium, is like tentacles that enter our bodies through several forms of spell, systems of sorcery without sorcerers. Capitalist sorcery works with a plethora of alchemies to capture our desires. We only desire what capitalism wants us to desire. When Augustine asks us, what do you love when you love? What do I love when I love my God? It's what I have, is what I love. Those spells desensitize our connections with the land, numb our minds to what's going on, reorient our lives endlessly towards our narcissistic wound, reshuffle our most fundamental beliefs, and clutters our religions with indifferences, with absences, while freezing all forms of critical and free thinking. Body, souls, minds, practices, desires, relationship, everything is captured. We are all captured by this destructive spirit that has no limit. Sadly, we are all left at this. All we have: personal achievements, individual liberty, and self-happiness. Indeed, a miserable, social, destructive way of living. We are so enamored of this spirit that we can't hear the spirit of the core of our own religions. We are so hypnotized by the evil spells of the system that we can't perceive the lives of others suffering. We have no clue how to imagine the earth as a living being who deserves honor and mutual care. Have I said earth? What does that mean? Something out there? So I ask my friends, where's the Ruach of Yahweh in our world? Where's the Asher of Olodumirah in our world? What is the Holy Spirit of Jesus in our world? What is the Spirit of Allah in our world? What is the presence of Buddha in our world? We are all captured in some way. We sold our soul long ago to the devil and we never got it back. Jesus Christ became a fantasy, or better said, a fetish. We don't believe in a peasant, social agitator, and revolutionary person, but rather a sort of divine somebody whom we consume through bread and wine without much consciousness of what this life demands of us daily. We continue to be under the spell of capitalism and colonialism, extracting all the life of the earth, killing animals, poisoning the air and the soil, polluting oceans, oppressing women, LGBTQ+, IA+, immigrants, and smashing poor countries. God receive all the glory. All this spell has also captured our political system, who only works for lobbyists, not for the people. And when it comes, just to mention one thing, global warming and ecological policies, it doesn't matter what party we are talking about. The Republicans are taking us to the abyss at 100 miles per hour, and the Democrats at 99.8 miles per hour. Both of them want to protect corporations, want to grow and develop, and they don't care about the earth. They're all for the progress of economy and not for the well-being of this living organism called the planet. And we must worry. The right for this and the next generations to have a future is already completely compromised. If you have children or grandchildren, know that they will not have a good world to live in. We're either going to burn or we're going to dry. But as always, there are always cases in which the spell of capitalism is not fully at work. And it is in these fissures that we can work together to be dispossessed of this spell and change. Greta Thunberg and several indigenous young people all around the world are demanding politicians to take action for their generation so that they can have a future. Here in the United States, I don't know if you have heard of it, 16 young activists argued that the U.S. state of Montana was responsible for climate change effects impacting their lives. A Montana judge found that the state violated their right to a clean and healthful environment, with which the state's constitution guarantees. They are showing the way. Just a few days ago, I don't know if you have heard of, Ecuador had a popular vote to decide if they would allow oil exploration in their Amazon forest, the Yasuní National Park. Ecuador is the only country on earth that has given the status of rights to the land in their own constitution. Yes, rivers, mountains, forests have the same rights as humans do. Immediately, all of the politicians said, we are going to die, we cannot afford to lose all this money. But the people of Ecuador say, no, we cannot afford to lose our land, our forest. They are telling us what to do. So how can we change this? I'm thinking about Christian scriptures and practices and how to help us tackle capitalism and coloniality. And two verses came to me. Romans 12, 1 and 2 says this. Verse 1, I appeal to you therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercy of God, to present your body as living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Offering bodies as a living sacrifice is not to find redemption by suffering. Instead, it is to understand that our bodies are larger territories and consider our bodies as the bodies of other beings. As the indigenous people say, my body, my territory. And not only this discrete being, my territory. Offering our bodies as living sacrifice means to offer ourselves to protect and care deeply for others, other bodies, human and more than humans near us. The living bodies of a deer, of an amarillo, of an owl, of a tree are also my living body as well. Verse 2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your minds. What is happening to the earth right now is telling us that it is time to change big, to change our ways of thinking, feeling, and engaging the world. To have our minds renewed means to have the earth as the mother, as the main concern, to learn with the indigenous people who said that the mother of all struggles is the struggle of the land. If we gain a new mind now with soil, a new mind that has trees, a new mind that has rivers falling in my thinking, then we might understand. When our talk is not only about humans and humans and humans, but if I cannot add a more than human in my thinking, I should consider twice if I want to talk about it or not. If I don't have a bird flying in my footnotes, I don't know if I should talk about anything. If I don't have the memory of the tree near to my house and I don't know the name of the story, I shouldn't talk about me. But I should only talk if I talk about plants, animals, waters that compose my own self. I had coffee, so there's a plant playing my body. I had water, there is a river in me. I ate food, I have the sun shining in my cells. Let me break this down. If it doesn't really matter if you talk about racism, if we don't include the land as our historical witnesses of environmental racism. It doesn't matter if we talk about feminist causes, if we don't include the land and connect the ways in which we treat the land and the women in the same way. It doesn't matter if we talk about sexual and gender identities, if we don't talk about the soil we stand on, because the system will allow some of us to engage and claim some different identities, but they'll never let you own any piece of land. It doesn't matter if our religion, if you talk about our religion, our theology, if it doesn't include the biomes around us. So if religions don't change, there's not going to be a world for their prayers, their rituals, and their beliefs. The earth must come first. Everything else comes after. So we need to, if capitalist system is a system of possessions, we, the religious people, have to find ways of dispossessing, of undoing the spells of our time, and cast off all of the spirits of colonial capitalism from our bodies, the spirits of death that are eating us alive without mercy. For these dispossessions, we need chants, songs, meditations, prayers, gestures, spells, anointment, good thinking, good feeling, good practices, so our bodies can be washed away anew, to cleanse our spirits, to gain forms of consciousness out of the state of deep confusion and disconnection in which we are right now. That's to be transformed by renewal of our minds and our bodies. To cast off the demons of ourselves, shifting and changing ourselves so we can help to cast off the demons of monotheisms, for instance, and learn to live with the presence of other deities, spirits, gods in our spiritual midst. Antônio Bispo from Brazil says that monotheisms create cosmophobia, which he says is the fear of living in somebody else's worlds. The worlds of other people, the worlds of other animals, other vegetations, cosmophobia. So let's cast off demons, my friends. Let's cast off demons of fascism, anger, and fear and hatred against each other. Let's cast off demons of hoarding and consumption. Let's cast off the demons of private properties and spiritual journeys where the land is not a part of it. Let's cast off the demons of social inequality and the acceptance that billionaires can exist because they give their money away. No, they cannot exist. Let's cast off the demons of the individualization of everything, of extractivism, agribusiness, fossil fuels, and big corporations. Let's cast off the demons of profit. Let's cast off the demons of colonization of the moon and Mars. Let's cast off the demons of the stupidity that we can destroy our planets and then go live in another planet. Let's cast off the demons of alienation, which makes us oblivious to the worlds of other animals and other more than human species. Let's cast off the demons of religions that are nothing less than perpetuators of this perverse, colonial, patriarchal, abusive, capitalist condition. Let's make it a spiritual practice. So I call that we embrace religions that embrace others. Let us support polytheisms of many forms, local spiritualities of many deities, and pantheisms of all kinds, when the world of a bee would be as important as the life of my children. The flight of the hummingbirds would be as important as the life of my mother and father. As the walk of the jaguar in the Amazon forest would be more important than the oil companies who are destroying their homes. The presence of trees more important than my church buildings. The course of a river more important than my own sacramental theology and the companies who throw poison in the river's bodies. If we survive the colonial capitalist world, we must think of an anti-racist, feminist, other than human, trans-environmental, anti-capitalist, and anti-colonial eco-politics. One that lets us mourn fully the loss of people, animals, plants, rivers, mountains, other livelihoods, and biomes as we protect them from continue their losses. This will be a transformation in our ways of affection. How we allow ourselves to be affected. And how we reorient our eco-politics where our ancestors are called back. But our ancestors not only humans, but the animals, the plants, the rivers, also as our ancestors. Now, my friends, I think we can go to bearing grief and breathing liberation. It's a process that we now need to learn how to mourn fully. Because colonial capitalism doesn't allow us to go there. See, in our system, if you lose somebody, how many days do you have at home before you go back to work? How many days? 3. And if you go back to work after 3 days, you're not feeling good, the first day people say, oh, so sorry for him, for her, for they. But then, if you're like that 3 days later, they're going to come to you and say, why don't you look for a doctor? Perhaps you need some medicine. Because medication is the way of the flow of the capital. Why you need to go to a doctor? To mourn somebody or the losses that you have. Because we don't have spaces for long mourning. Right after COVID, I was preaching at a festival of preachers and ministers. And I asked them, how many of you lost somebody during COVID? 99%. And I said, how many of you did the mourning of your beloved one? Nobody. So I tossed my lecture and I said, let's do a ritual. And let's talk and name about the people that you loved, that you lost. Their pain, their sorrow, their frustration, their anger, their sadness. Because to mourn, my friends, is to raise the names and the history of every single person and bring the worlds associated with this person. That's why the Latinx community always name those who have died in crossing the borders, and we say, presente. Maria, presente. Johannes, presente. Daisy, presente. Death is a powerful event that needs to be attended carefully. Every single story matters, just like the hymn. Every voice, lift up every voice. If we don't mourn the dead ones, they will come back haunting us with violence, resentment, and indignation. It acts transversely to consolidate a society that reproduces and multiplies violence in the denial of mourning. If you don't mourn properly, my friends, we lose the ability to create narratives of love. Mourning someone gives the capacity to love again. Unfinished mourning settles love in a place of confusion and unknown. But let me ask you this now, my friends. Can we start the mourning of other species? More than humans? When was the last time you mourned an animal? Not only your pet. We don't even allow to mourn or to do a funeral for our pets. It's embarrassing. When was the last time you saw a tree being cut and you cried? Did you go to your river next to your house and you wept with the river? For the river? If you don't do that, we only think that we are the measure of everything. But that's the thing. It is the world that is the measure of ourselves. We are the same body, the same land. We need to restore the forms of perception that modernity has taken away from us. Anthony Payne asks, what does it mean to mourn Black Death in a country that does not recognize Black life? And I continue. How to mourn the lives of indigenous people when they are nobodies. How to mourn the death of immigrants at the border between Mexico and US when what we want is to kill them. How to mourn all the people who died of COVID. And more, how do we mourn the killing of trees if trees are not living beings? How do we mourn the extraction of mines when mountains are just inanimate rocks? How can we mourn the death of the oceans if we never knew they were alive? How can we mourn the lives turned into ashes from the fires burning the earth right now when we don't even have a clue what's going on? How can we prevent the sixth extinction of precious animals, insects, and other creatures when you are so lost and sad and depressed and feeling so powerless? In a country marked by colonial capitalism where the annihilation of indigenous black, brown, red, yellow people and all sorts of animals and all forms of life have not been properly mourned, how can we move beyond the melancholic places of stagnation? How can we find ways to mourn the death that had no tears? How can we shed tears for that which we never knew that could cry about and for? As we learn this complex work of mourning, we are called to start breathing liberation where we are, bearing grief, inhaling the pain of the world, breathing liberation, exhaling the breath that we have received already as liberation. Every breath is a breath of healing that you received, so you can return it. So we need to start thinking about our connection with the land. How do I relate to the land I am inhabiting right now? How can I engage with the diversity of the species in the land where I live, the animals, vegetation? What are the names of the rivers near me? What does the land tell me about time immemorial? What are the struggles of this land, of the people, of animals lived in this area? Can the birds in my biome have proper migration during the winter? The bearing of grief and breathing liberation is this one process. It's about to start to feel a deeper relation with other forms of life. When you start thinking about the bees who are dying, this is the worst years for bees. And bees and butterflies, they are responsible for most of our food. If you don't care about the bees, I don't care what you believe. It's nothing. If you don't care about the bees, there's no reason you are alive. I'm exaggerating, but just this much. I hope that we will go around our neighborhood, around this church, and start to be in awe with the plants, with the sky, with the water. It's about, bearing grief and breathing liberation is about learning what the psalmist said, be still. Be still. Because with capitalism, we have to run, and you're always late. You're not doing everything, and we are supposed to do. But the Bible is saying something else. Be still. Go with the pace of the land. Go with the pace of the cattle and the children, as we learn from the Hebrew Bible. Be still and know. Be still and know. So that we can start to see the presence of other people. And when you have to bear grief for a presence that is gone, how can we turn that lost presence into other forms of presence? How can we turn that which died without value, tribute, or form of transformation and give it value and bring that power back to us? In 2019, I led this worship at Union Call. It was known by Plant Gate, in which we had this celebration. We had plants in our chapel, and we were supposed to talk to the plants. Have you read Robin Kimmerer? She has the book Braiding Sweetgrass, that she said, stop talking with plants as it. They are beings. So call them she, he, them, they. So we did that. And I said, now we're going to talk to the plants. And I told my class, have something to say to the plants, because most of the people say, and they had something. But then, for my surprise, everybody started to talk to the plants. And I started saying, I'm sorry, because I always paid attention to plants as decoration. Not as living beings, not as medicine, not as full organisms. And then people start to talk, and then this student start crying. She said, I cannot do this. Because if I start to make them have subjectivity, I don't have what it takes to deal with the death and destruction that is going on everywhere. And I said, she got it. That's the renewal of our minds, when our subjectivity is not about a discrete sense of self. That is Western bullshit. The sense of subjectivity is myself in relation with you and every other being. That's what we need to go through, a resubjectification of ourselves. So then I wonder how that subjectification can amplify my worlds, and I can live with other beings' worlds. So I wonder, if I find a sloth, how can I be enchanted by it and participate in her world, his world? An octopus, a bird, a worm, a raccoon. But if you want to do that, know that it's hard to do this. Actually, Consolo says about this pain, about ecological disaster, she said, I was bereft to deal with ecological disasters. I was at loss intellectually and emotionally. I felt adrift in waves of sadness, grief, loss, and pain. Unanchored from my life, isolated from those around me, and unsure of how to process what I was experiencing. It was a sense of almost absolute sorrow, without an idea of how to move forward or how to see beyond the edges, the fringes of these feelings. It was grief I did not expect or anticipate. It was there, waiting for me in the morning when I woke. There at night when as I drifted off, in my dreams, and on constant companion throughout the day. And it was related to ecological loss. That's why you cannot do this alone or you go crazy. That's why we need communities. We need communities to do this, to sustain us, to empower us. We cannot do this alone. Because you will remind me that there are other things. There is life happening. Even when it's death taking over, there is life moving and bursting everywhere. As Timothy Morton says, now it's time for grief to persist, to ring throughout the world. Because there is life there too. Philosopher Julia Kristeva said about pain, the hidden side of my philosophy is pain. It's my mute sister. Every sorrow can be held if it becomes a story. Isaac Dinesen says, all sorrows can be born if you put them into a story or tell a story about them. That's the work of ritual. Put a story in the sorrow, in the pain, in the loss. Mili Lacombe, a Brazilian queer writer, says, unfortunately, one does not leave a legacy without this legacy also being the wreckage of oneself. But to offer ourselves, even our wreckage, as a living sacrifice, is also the way of breathing life to somebody else. So what do you do with your pain? Walter Ugumine says, affection must be nurtured for a suffering that has helped us build happiness. Never cultivate the pain, but remember it with respect if it has been an inducer of improvement for having made us better. We hold each other's pain. We hold each other's losses. We hold each other's weaknesses, contradictions. That's why we need community that can linger together even in the midst of our contradictions. So my friends, entangle yourself with the land, but with communities of beings that are humans and more than humans. Create rituals. Create stories. What is the love that you have for the land that you are a part of? We can rememorialize our past, bring back our ancestors, help us with repetition, offer the circulation of social memory and the expansion of our subjectivities. The ritual space is a charged space with the political, social, ecological character of the morning, but one that can cast away the spell of capitalism and bring back the possibility of living not in the flow of capitalism, but in the flow of bearing grief and breathing liberation. Amen.